In this video, we're going to look at a little countdown application that will basically let us stick in a date and tell us how many days until that date. So event name, let's do Independence Day. Independence Day of this year would be July 7, 4, 2023. And I can say countdown, and it tells me that there are 89 days until Independence Day, Tuesday, July 4th, 2023. All right, pretty simple. Let's see how it works. Index files, pretty straightforward. Countdown 2, we have a label for our event. We have a label for us to stick in the date, or excuse me, a text box to stick in the date. And we have the countdown button, and we have a space for a message here. Okay, again, we're using jQuery for this, and countdown.js is our script. So let's take a look at that. We can look at the CSS. There's nothing really complicated about that. The message is going to be in red. Here's our JavaScript. So the event name, we're pulling out the value of the event name. We're pulling out the value for the event date out of the date box. And we're getting the message label message. We're getting a reference to that. Okay, so we have these constants set up. Okay, event name. So everything's written basically inside this one. When they click countdown, it's all in the document ready section. Let's check the event name length and make sure it's if it's equal to 0, or the event date length is equal to 0, which means if they didn't type anything in these boxes, we're going to tell them, please enter a name and a date. Then we're going to take the event date and we're going to split it. Remember, it's still a string. We're going to split it based on the slashes. So we're requiring people to use 2 slashes, to use the slashes in the dates. How are we going to verify that? Well, immediately after we split it into its parts, remember that split method's going to split it into parts. If it's in a proper format, it's going to have 2 slashes, which means it'll be split into 3 parts. So if the date parts, if that array that comes out of here, if its length is not equal to 3, they didn't use 2 slashes. There's not a good format in there. So we pop up a message to them, please enter the date in month, day, year format. Next thing, we're going to create a constant called year. And then we're going to look at the event date substring, event date length -4, so the last 4 characters. Okay, if that's not a number, then they didn't do it in the right format, and we're going to say, please put your date in the correct format. I talked earlier in one of the other videos about when we allow users to type dates, we have to spend some time validating them to make sure they did it correctly. Okay, so convert the date string to a date object. So let's take what they typed and try to convert it, this event date that they typed in, let's try to convert it to a date object. Okay, if that date object, remember, if it doesn't do it correctly, if this is an invalid date, that date object will contain a string that says invalid date, in which case we're going to tell them, please enter in this format. So we've tried several times now to validate different parts of their date. Finally, we try to make a new date object, and if it just doesn't work, we tell them, hey, go back and do the right format. So all this is input validation for that date. All right, assuming that it made it through all these, then we'll start this. Capitalize each word of the event name. So we're taking we're going to make a nice user interface. So if I wouldn't have capitalized Independence Day, it would have done it for me. That the formatted name equal an empty string, and we're going to take the event name and we're going to split it up based on any spaces that might be in it. For each I in words, so we're going to use I as a temp variable for each word in there, we're going to check the first letter, and we're going to take the first letter and switch it to uppercase. So word sub I equals the substring, the first letter in the string, switch to uppercase, and we're going to call that first letter. And then we're going to take the word and we're going to concatenate that capitalized first letter onto the words sub I, the substring, starting at position 1, and we're going to switch it to lowercase. And that'll happen for each of the words in there. So each word in whatever I did for the label will get capitalized. And then we'll pad the end of it with the word length +1. And then we'll do a formatted name. We'll trim the end in case they used extra spaces. All right, so this part didn't do a whole lot other than make our application be very user-friendly. If I go back to this application and run it again, and I type Independence Day in lowercase, and I put 7/4/2023, 89 days until, and notice Independence Day is capitalized. So that's what that little section did. It made it user-friendly and capitalized this day. I capitalized the word independence, capitalized the word day, using string manipulation. All right, now we're going to calculate the days. So we're going to take today's date and call it today. And then we're going to call date.getTime. So the date that we figured out up here, we're going to subtract today's date from it. And that's going to tell us the milliseconds. We saw this in a previous example. We figure out how many milliseconds are in a day. And then we subtract, after we subtracted these, that tells us how many milliseconds from today the event is. We're going to take that and divide how many milliseconds are in a single day and call math.ceiling on it. And it'll tell us how many days as a whole number are left until that date. In my example, I was using Independence Day. So that calculates the number of days, and we saw that calculation earlier. So we have a lot of code in here. This is the meat of it, figuring out the number of days. But first we had to do a bunch of input validation. Then we did some nice formatting to make it user-friendly. Here we finally calculated the days. Now let's create our message. So we'll start out with our message as a blank string. Okay. We're going to take the date and we're going to run the toDate string on it. If days to date equals 0, so if it was today, it would say, hooray, today is Independence Day. And it would stick the date in there. It would say July 4th, 2023. Otherwise, if the date is, days to the date is a positive number, that's where we get this many days until Independence Day. So it's constructing that message. If it's a negative number, it's going to say that the date happened so many days ago. And I didn't demonstrate those, but you can certainly run this yourself. It's part of the book applications, which you can download from the book website. And then finally, we update the label. So, not a tough application. A lot of input validation, some nice formatting to make it more user-friendly. We have one calculation based on subtracting two dates, the milliseconds, the time from two dates, and calculating the number of days, and then formatting a nice message to print back to the user, and then putting the focus in the first box so it's ready to go when the application first loads.